We have 10 neighbors who have written in support, and 5 of those are within the 125 feet radius, and 3 of them are our surrounding neighbors, immediate left, right, and in front.
Any questions from the commission?
Yeah, I was wondering, maybe this is for Stephen, but what is the reason that they don't do the height variance?
Because the city says they're probably well within it.
The reason I think, and we do have a visual, so if you want to see it, but the height between where we want to start and all the way to the top is only 28 feet. So it's not 35 or higher.
And I think the other mitigating thing is you're planning on putting a room above the garage, right?
Correct.
So it's part of the house as opposed to a
But I
standing
thought
garage.
the zoning height limit was 15.
That's for a freestanding garage.
Yeah.
But we're
Oh,
detached.
But this is part of the house.
It's
Oh,
an
okay.
addition to the
I
house.
understand.
Commissioner Whether.
Just, is that black line, the solid black line there at the top, is that the right of way? Is that where?
Yes.
And that's where the garage will end?
Yes, it'll be 16 feet from the new construction to the street.
Okay, that was my curiosity.
And then we also have 2 neighbors with us.
Convert the current garage into living space.
Correct.
And then you're
That's
gonna
the
build a
idea.
garage in front of it, and how tall is the garage gonna be, the new one,
Whatever this new garage is.
roughly?
But
Yeah.
it'll have a second
Yeah.
floor.
It will happen.
It'll go up.
So it's very confusing because seen from the outside, and then there'll be the house. So the height of the garage from the inside is going to probably be maybe, I don't know, 17 feet.
So there's gonna be living
16
space
feet.
above the new garage as well?
Correct, yes.
And so you're gonna lower the grade of the existing
Correct.
garage driveway?
Yes.
Do you know how much?
Probably
4 or 5 feet?
6 or 7.
Yes.
It's
So,
like
yeah.
8 feet right now.
Yeah, I drove by it today, and I did notice there's it looked like a couple other properties have the same situation.
Yes.
That are nearby.
The development of structure.
The driveway slope is pretty severe.
They probably don't want to do anything yet because their car hasn't even slid down the driveway.
Are there any flooding concerns with the roadway in terms of after a heavy storm? Do you have any problems with it takes a few hours for the roadway to dry out or anything like that?
It does, after heavy rainfall, it does have great stream of its own. I think, our neighbors can contest that, we agree to that, but it's not a couple hours, it's
Are there any other questions from the commission?
How much of a driveway are you gonna have? How many feet?
16 feet.
So it is
Yeah.
16 feet.
But the front of the garage comes right out to the property line.
that's correct.
Correct.
The right of way.
Right away.
Right away.
Right away.
That is the property line.
Yeah, it's the
Yes.
same thing.
But not the street.
Are there any questions from the public? Are we ready to vote then? Then on BZA 22-125, 289 Lenape Avenue, Lenape Drive, shall the application be approved? Commissioner Crowell?
Yes.
Commissioner Witherholt?
Yes.
Commissioner Bolden?
Yes.
Commissioner White?
Yes.
Commissioner Motil?
I'm gonna vote no. I just wanna say, the reason is, I don't feel comfortable with your setback being so close to the street, and that the other existing homes, it doesn't line up. And to me, that's an issue that I have with any kind of new additions or something. And that's the only reason why, that it's too close to the street what you're doing, so I'm gonna vote no.
Commissioner Wyman?
No.
Chair will abstain. The motion passes. Good luck with your project.
Thank you.
The next one is BZA 22113, 3100 North High Street, Field Funeral Home. They want to, in order to split the lot, they want to reduce the width of a shared drive aisle from 20 feet to 9 feet and reduce the maneuvering area for parking spaces from 20 feet to 10 feet. They assured us that The sole reason they want this is because of bank financing rules. They need to split the lot. That doesn't include a single change in any building. But in order to split the lot, to make both lots legal, these are the variances required to do that. They want to refinance one building, and the bank said we're nowhere in the refinance it at other buildings on the same parcel. The committee recommended 7-0 in favor of this. I also can say I got two comments. One was initially negative. Both of them were initially concerned, but when I told them that there were no plans to put any new buildings on, this wasn't time to facilitate building, one said they went to non-objection. They didn't get back from the other one. One big reason, besides the reason they aren't changing anything, the other reason people thought to support it was that they've preserved a building that very easily could have been torn to the ground with no need for a variance. And if people are going to do things like preserve buildings that we really want them to preserve, we shouldn't make life hard for them when they need something like when they need to divide the lot down the middle, or not that they need to divide, to split the lot. That's. Are there any other comments? Those were the only other. Those are very quick.
So, thank you. Is the applicant here tonight? I see Jack and Nick. Could you please come forward?
Yeah. Jack Reynolds, attorney with Smith and Hale, and Stephen gave you a good rundown.
Hi,
Courtney,
Courtney
give you
Lewis.
an update.
Yeah, so Monday we opened our new building and welcomed 36 new families to our school, bringing our total care for the only reason we're doing this is if you intend to own both of them, but to refine. Yeah, so that's why we're here tonight.
Jack, are there
Pictures worth 1,000 words.
Yeah.
The yellow is the new point 031, where those, for the drive aisle, and then in the middle, two questions that were asked at the zoning subcommittee that we were able to confirm is that the new building does have its, other one was brought up by one of the board members. Were we sure that we had enough space between the little triangle area to the back of the curb to maintain the 20 foot, and we have 20 points. So again, we tried our darndest not to have to get variances. These were the only two things that we have to.
Single ownership right now, and that's the plan for the imaginable future. Yeah, is there something that allows a cross access if for some reason
If they were to sell it, they would have to grant the easement with it. But under Ohio state law, you can't grant yourself an easement. It's a nullity because you own both properties. So you can't grant yourself an easement.
Okay, great.
Synopsis, although when Jack just of your hardship of Sharon Woods that is overlooked by Clintonville, the city. You clearly know that you've stepped in or you're driving through a street in Sharon Township because it doesn't have the zoning stipulations that we properties on two adjacent parcels. Had every intention of putting 20% down, conventional mortgage, outstanding credit that I've worked very hard. The one house has a detached garage that shares a driveway with the second property, which has no setback between that detached garage. Not financeable.
Yeah.
So I wanted the property. I wanted the property badly, so I funneled all this money, scraped up enough money to pay cash for both properties, fired off an email to the county auditor's office and asked if the parcels be combined. 2 hours later, got an approval. If only I'd known it was that easy. Now, I get what you're doing. It's kind of a similar issue.
Yeah.
It's a similar hardship, actually. And I'm just so sorry because it seems like only yesterday that you were here getting a change of use variance, and I'm so thrilled that you're a raving success and that you have become the welcome amenity in Clintonville.
Thank you.
Congrats to you and your team.
We are very fortunate to be here, and my husband and I spoke at the last one and said, like, gosh, we opened in 2020, January 3rd, or January 2nd. It closed down for 6 weeks. because when it got tough, everyone rallied around us. And so for that, we're forever grateful, and we will just every day be here for our community and really look forward to continuing to watch our future leaders grow in our community. So.
And I also share.
So that was like my previous job is working for JP Morgan, and now I'm like, oh, I'm so glad I'm gonna do this. And they didn't know who they were working with.
That's
we'll
right.
sit up here and tell our story all day long.
Stephen had touched on, unique properties. When we're asked to consider unique story, unique history with it, you were respectful of history and the story of the property. You improved the property in, I think, a pretty significant way in adapting it to a very unusual circumstance. You're incredibly deserving of consideration. So congratulations on your success.
Real quick, my only request is, it's not a funeral home. Let's refer to it as the daycare. Let's move on. I'm just kidding.
We'll help you to turn the page on that.
Okay, you too.
Are there
Standalone parcels owned by the same entity that owns the current daycare facility.
Thank you.
And I just want clarification. Let's say she sells the place and somebody buys it and they want to maybe
They do their due diligence, get their Alta survey done, see the driveway space, and that as a part of the condition of sale, they are granted an easement as a part of that process. So, it is something that, that's why you do your Alta survey, you identify all of the items associated with the properties, and then as a part of, the sale, you request the variance to continue to maintain that driveway and the space.
So that would be somebody's argument against why we shouldn't grant such a thing.
It happens all the time.
When somebody wants to argue, it's like, well, this is why this was done in the first place. This is why we're against, another use on the other parcel versus what's being done. Is that what you would argue, Attorney Reynolds?
It's an accommodation for an issue that can be solved through the variance process.
I've got a question I just thought of, so the variance when granted carries with the property.
Sure.
And that will be recorded on the Franklin County Recorder's site.
Yes.
Is the Alta survey that accompanied that meat of information recorded with that?
What would happen is the Alta survey would come in and identify the building and the drive aisles, etc.
Okay.
You would then examine it to see if it meets what's required under the City of Columbus Code.
Okay.
And there is when you would sit down and say, sure, that we're granting you an easement in order to use it in the future is once the
Where's wait time?
it would make, you've got the same name, could combine them into the lot line.
You need that California entrance for the California to come in and out to like circular traffic to help with that. So, who knows in the future, but that would be, however.
Seeing none, are we ready to vote? BZA should be approved. Commissioner Kroll?
Yes.
Commissioner Weatherholt?
Yes.
Commissioner Bolt? Chair abstains?
Please apologize. I was remiss in forgetting to introduce my colleague from the city, and I don't know if perhaps he communicated about, or perhaps Chloe had communicated.
We didn't have a staff point out a list on the agenda, Marshall. I'm sorry. So we
I'm
had it as a
sorry.
placeholder, and then
I just felt bad. I had intended to introduce him so that he knew who he was.
Okay, good to see you. Yes, we got county auditor representation and plus funds from the city.
Last name, first name, it's kind of confusing.
Yeah.
Is Diana Miller here? It's a priority here, and have you go first.
I have to say, no. We all know how much I love this.
I'll come back to you.
Okay. So I first would like to thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to speak on behalf of the residents of Aldrich Road. It was voted on at the August meeting. There was no mention to allow net parking or to the burden with restricted parking was put on the residents who utilize street parking currently. At that meeting, But with the vote for restricted parking, residents who oppose restricted parking no longer have a voice. We believe our neighbors. We do respect our neighbors. We want restricted parking, and we ask that the same consideration be given to those of us that use street parking on a regular basis. Last week, I went around and did a petition, stating that by signing this petition, we have over 80%. So they're asking that the CAC votes tonight. If you look at the little packet I gave you, second page, shows school days, weekdays, parking, permit parking, plans to see. My crack for the day. Household. One household is unoccupied as the owner passed away. 42 of those households voted to, person wanted to have his name crossed off 4 days after he signed it. 2 I wasn't able to reach, and 1 supported permit parking, but I couldn't get to them. So we would like if you guys would grant us the permit parking. There's 36 surveys supporting restrictions. It was important to us that we give every resident an opportunity to support or say no to permit parking. We wanted everybody to have a choice. Just a few, 3 of the residents, my next door neighbors purchased their house a month ago. They knew nothing about restricted parking. 139. 139, the near driveway is so narrow, it like lays in the street, or lays in the, of the 11 streets, if you look at my map, the streets as well as providing parking opportunity, yes. About permit parking, to the CAC commissioners, supported changing the school, actually go out, go to the September meeting, and see what they're thinking, things like that, regarding the parking on our street. This needs to go to planning development committee, to come up again when these kids from Waterson moved to what happened last month with the apartment buildings on High Street to find parking solutions instead of restricting parking. So Mrs. Thompson, who's been resident of our street for over 40 years, speaks about his burden, their burden.
I'm the bad guy. I have on the street, and it's been that way.
Hours taking down.
So that's the real story. We've been on that street. It's part of our life.
I mean, it's our property.
I don't understand. I guess now I could have a permit. So,
25 bucks out.
Anybody that had trouble.
We
I
our house.
need a truck. That's the only way I can get it from the woods to me. Like, where is it?
If Waterson needs a place to park, I feel like that, they can walk to school, but their friends carpooled, they figured it out. It was never an issue. I don't know, I think all these kids now have cars, and, our children didn't have their own cars, and they do now. And so Waterson needs to come up with a solution to streets, and it's gonna become a problem, in the outlying streets. But, as someone being on our street, which we love Aldridge Road, we love Clintonville, for so many years, we should be, and our properties are very valuable now, as we all know. And
What's your time?
Well, it seems that the Waterson Log Jam is all over 10 cars. And it doesn't go down the whole street. Right now, the whole street's being white. And it seems like since the signs went up, that found another spot to park. Why does it have to be so radical on people that aren't even yes.
For 40 years.
I just can't help but go back and revisit Bishop Waterson's request for a setback variance. They may build their parking lot, parking for our students. Let's not forget, they asked for a variance after they already brought in the backhoe and started pouring that variance and sat before the CACs because they received a code enforcement citation and a cease to do construction. And I don't know why nobody has approached Bishop Watterson, was already resolved your issue. Now you're asking the city to resolve another issue that Bishop Watterson has created back in and creating a bigger problem. I just don't see how nobody's holding Bishop Watterson to task. The neighborhood, we are asking that you. Now, what is the population of the student populace at that school? Increase their student population if they don't have enough parking spaces. The city knocking on the door saying what you asked for, and they're driving a wedge between neighbors.
Right.
Now, for 18 years, and I always consistently sell about 30% of my revenue in sales, home buyers and home sellers in Clintonville. Is I would say 1 out of every 3. And I can say that it's true. They use it for storage because they might live in Beachwald or storage. A lot of people are kind of crafty. They like a workshop, and their garage is their workshop. Or they've got a family with a lot of people need on-street parking for their cars that they pay in favor of restricted parking. When we have visited this issue before, and said, okay, Bishop Watterson, here's your setback variance. I appreciate the fact that you're wanting to alleviate the parking problem in the neighborhood. I just don't see how we can do Bishop Watterson at their word.
Sure. Commissioner White.
So when is your truck parked on the street? When? Yeah. Well, almost every day.
Like certain hours or?
All day.
All day.
I'm not.
They're not able to use their driveway if they put the truck in. They can't access the garage because
Well,
it's a 1-lane road.
Yeah, I was just trying to understand, you use it for work?
I'm not out cutting wood every day.
Okay, that's fine.
Tells the scenario. It's there a lot, right in front of our house.
And can I say that personally, I park my car, only my car on the street when I'm home. I have 2 children. One lives with us full-time, commutes to college. He has an all-electric car, so he needs access to our house to charge his car for his safety. If he parks in front of my car, he's not gonna remember to, Mom, I need you to move your car so I can plug my car in. My daughter is graduating in May. She has an all-electric car. She will be home. So we have 4 drivers, 4 cars. We only park 1 on the street, and that's my car. And this petition, everybody signed it from the top of High Street, with the exception of one. I couldn't catch him home. I think he has a girlfriend. He's never home anymore. All the way to my house. My neighbor signed it 4 days later. He asked to be taken off. So I'm like, okay, take it off. The 4 other people that said no are at the bottom of the street, or at Zeller, towards the bottom, and aren't even affected by what happened at the top of the street. So, you know what? I've been there 32 years. My husband's been there almost 35. But I do want to be able to park in front of the house that I pay taxes on. I want the police to show up. I want the fire department to show up. I want my trash taken out. And I want to be able to park in front of my house. I'm not asking for anything else. And I have a petition for you. If you would like
Anybody
it.
would feel that way. I mean, I think all of you would feel that way about your own homes.
Well, I appreciate you putting this together. You put a lot of work into this, and I appreciate all that work. It's not something that we can ask this or tell the city to create a permanent parking. There's a process to start. I think it would be correct for maybe the commission to reach out to the city and say, look, there's a larger parking issue here. The signs are up, and there may be, in other words, I think right now to just say, we want to have permanent parking presumes the solution. Here's the solution. Well, maybe that's doing something else that's also a half measure. In other words, if does everybody in your street need to buy a permit, or maybe just the people who want to park their cars on the street 24 hours a day, they want to have the ability to do that, $25 a year. If I can park my car on the street, yeah, great. the city has a much more sophisticated way of monitoring parking now with plate readers and everything else that, you know, a few months ago when we talked about this, you mentioned the old school, you know, chalking the tire and coming back a few hours later. Well, with plate readers, that's no longer a thing. They're driving down the street, you know, a light comes on to tell them, you know, there's a car that's in here, you know, so it's a more sophisticated thing. There may be other alternatives, and they may be good alternatives that work for you and your neighbors. And I think maybe what we should do is work with the Department of Neighborhoods to have Division of Parking look at this and first of all decide, you know, is there an area here worth studying, and you know, and they'll use those cars to do a survey to sort of see, is this parking at capacity that permits are warranted? Is there another half measure? Is there a partial solution here that would work for you? So I think you've done a good job of explaining the solution, explaining the problem. I think maybe we should use the city with all those resources they have to help us find the solution that fits the neighbor, fits the problem. And I don't think anybody here presumes to know what that is. I think you've defined the problem for us. I think we should pass this along to the city and try to be advocates for you getting the right solution to manage the parking with the complexity of, you know, what Waterson is doing and everything else. There's a whole ecosystem that kind of needs to be understood. So
I'm willing to pursue that at any level.
yeah.
I feel like probably out of 50 houses on this street, I don't think they all got the good, solid picture that we were dealing with. And if we,
I don't think they understand the long-term ramifications. Like right now, it says weekdays, so that means come Christmas time, if Christmas is on a Friday, and you have people at your house, they're gonna have to move every 2 hours. You're gonna have to buy a house.
Right.
And I did the action plan too. I want to say I prepared that in September because 2 days before the meeting, I found out the Sports Connection on their own leased 20 of their spots behind their building to Waterson Kids. So I don't think as I said before, I don't think all the options were explored.
Right.
So
what I'd like to do is I'll ask two things. I'm going to ask the Department of Neighborhoods to get involved in how we can get parking to look at this, and that goes to defining the area and seeing what would be involved, and see what sort of creative solutions there might be with this that we don't know, and also maybe ask our planning and development committee who has, you know, it is a committee of many residents here, but there's a lot of people who serve on that planning and development committee who are professional transportation planners, who are city planners, there's a lot of expertise that people just donate to the community. They would be a good resource for us to use as well. So that would be my suggestion, is that we pass this along to the city and try to follow it as best we can.
Well, I have 2 questions. On the action plan, I left the 5 off the back end of my phone number. If somebody from the city wants to reach out, my phone number's on there. 2,
it's 1 digit short.
Yes, it should be 4775.
Okay.
I forgot the 5. I know, you know, I'm trying to do everything else. So, but I have a question though. Since we're gonna pass this on and we have residents that need to use street parking, are we allowed to put a little note card in our window that we are a resident? Or are we gonna have to move our cars every 2 hours? I mean, maybe our clients can answer that.
I'm gonna maybe defer to the law enforcement officer that we have with us tonight. sorry to put you on the line.
I can't.
It was either Mike.
But I don't know that officers are driving up down the street right in front of it.
Right.
I don't
You
think
know,
they
the neighbor calls because, you know.
I mean, that could happen. It just, I know there was a parking issue on High Street in front of a business, and they called parking enforcement, and they said, we don't get up there very often. I mean, I just don't think that.
Should we just put a sign in our windshield on the inside and say, homeowner, please knock before writing ticket? You know, I mean.
I can't promise you that will work, because most of the time when officers write tickets, they're in their car and they look in their eyes and they write the ticket, and then they get out and put it on the window.
Question.
I got more comments. And we have the restriction of 2 hours, and it works fine in the sense that nobody from Waterson parks on our street, and the residents just leave their car, all worry about it. unless you really have mean neighbors, that's called a police.
Well, we would have a couple who would.
I suspect they would.
Dave, I'll let you speak. Let Diana, I appreciate, you and I have worked together for months, looking through it right now. I mean, some of these have already been answered to you, in terms of marking the curb. I sent your reply, that they're not gonna allow that. They said that in order to get permit parking, your street has to be used by the non-residents. So, whether or not they can work something out with that, we'll see. But, the school days, I wish if there was a desire for residents on Aldridge to change that sign name, the signage, you should have let us know.
In April of 2021, when we had a Zoom call with Kendra, the city said it would be school days, it would go no further than Zeller. Now we're at the circle.
The survey that was handed out had a sign
Right.
on the picture that said that this is what the sign would read, and that's what everybody agreed on.
I do not remember school days or work days on that.
I've got it in my file. And that's the survey that was sent out to everybody. So, and I'm sorry, but Watterson is a big part of this blame, and I hear everybody saying it, but so is the School of Phlebotomy. So let's put blame where it needs to be. And like Mark said, our neighbors on Cook park on our street all the time. We have restricted parking, and nobody gets ticketed, and I told one of your neighbors jokingly on the phone that you guys need a mediator more than anybody, because if neighbors are going to call the police for somebody parking their car in the street, that's a problem.
Well,
I'm sorry.
will you pay the ticket then if I get a ticket? I mean, because water.
I think you're being really overreacting. I'm sorry, and I'll just say it because it's like Mark said, and my neighbors on Cook. I mean, we park our car and say we don't have the sign out in front, but everyone else, it's like, really, we don't say anything. And I don't know where the kids are parking now. I'd like to know, but that'd be a good question. That'd be a good thing to find out. I'm not asking you to do it, but I'm wondering where they're parking too.
Well, didn't we say at one point that the juniors or sophomores aren't driving age yet, and
It's usually March, but there had been cars parked. I mean, I was driving over there to see, and there was like 10 to 15 at times on the upper part of Aldridge here during the last 4 months since school started, and
well, I'm sorry you don't see the importance of this like we do, but.
No, I understand what you're saying, but I do think you're overreacting in terms of your neighbors and somebody going to call the police to have a car removed. That's one. I'm just saying.
They see the signs now and they're afraid.
Yeah, well, I get it. I do, but I don't think it's going to happen. I'm sorry, but I just don't. Now, if the people that live on the upper part noticing students with Watterson stickers on their car and seeing kids walk out from the School of Phlebotomy and parking and going into the school, I'm sure people would call.
I don't think we're seeing that right now.
It works.
It works.
I just want to.
Commissioner White.
I just want to say this is an example of rational thinking and exuding calm and patience, and maybe revisiting some of those incremental steps that weren't taken. I more see it as an overreaction resulting in the restricted parking. So I commend you for wanting to tap the brakes, go back, revisit the plan, and maybe go back to July 2019 when Bishop Watterson received that parking variance, or the setback variance for parking lot. So I think the overreaction is in and of itself the restricted parking. I think it's commendable what you've done to tap the brakes and say, whoa, whoa, whoa. Due diligence was missed on so many areas. Nobody at Bishop Watterson's been engaged. Take it back a notch, revisit with the community, get everybody in the neighborhood on the same side, and try to engage Bishop Watterson and say, hey, let's take this back to July 2019.
So what do we do with my petition that I have 84% support for permit parking?
Of which street?
Mine, Aldridge Road.
Okay, that's just Aldridge. I think you've outlined that there's a larger problem here. What I'm hoping is that the city can present us with some answers to the problems. Like, it seems to me like people who need, I think you did a good job of outlining, you need to be able to park a car on the street 24 hours in order to be able to use your driver functional. There may be a way for the city to accommodate that on a more individualized basis, as opposed to, well, everybody on the street has to buy a permit in order to allow that to happen. And there's a pretty high bar to establish that permit threshold. You have to demonstrate that there's peak hours when 80% of the parking spaces are occupied. Essentially, you hit that point where the parking becomes unavailable because at 80%, people stop looking for a space. There's just no parking there, and it sort of breaks down, doesn't work right. So I think if we engage the city and sort of say, this is the concern that's been raised to us, how can we address the whole neighborhood to move forward? So let's reach out to the city and see if we can engage those resources. This is good data that we have, and we'll pass this along. We won't filter this out, and included your phone number there. So at some point, I wouldn't doubt that the city contacts you and debriefs you on what's the problem here. You know, we've heard this secondhand from the commission, and we get it firsthand from you, and try to find a solution that works for
Okay.
I would request a digital version of that to be shared with the
Yeah,
available.
And I don't know what, it just seems an infringement on our homeowner rights. Case, you know, 35. We're almost 35.
Why was it?
Technically, you don't own the street in front of your house.
No, I know that.
So.
And I don't think we should pay because Waterson or the schools will bother me.
You're gonna apologize
No,
for that,
it's
but I'm
fine.
glad you had it.
Yeah, no worries at all. So my name is Marshall Troxel. I want to highlight 8 issues that are appearing on the ballot of Columbus voters this November. And since you raised your hand like that, but more of them are over here on this table if anybody wants any. So the first 5 issues, and altogether these are going to be issues 14 through 21 on the ballots of that folks in Columbus will see. The first 5 that altogether would amount to a $1.5 billion investment in neighborhood infrastructure and services. And each issue, each of the 5, corresponds to the amount of money that would be allocated for specific services. So issue 14, and again, it's a little bit easier to see it written down, but I'll run through them, would dedicate $300 million for health, safety, and infrastructure. Issue 15 would allocate $200 million toward recreation and parks. Issue 16 would put $200 million toward neighborhood development with a specific focus on affordable housing. Issue 17 would dedicate $250 million toward public service, and issue 18 would allocate $550 million toward public utilities. I'm sure most of the folks in the room may already be aware of this, but an important distinction between a bond issue and, say, a tax levy is that a bond issue will not increase property taxes or impose any sort of new tax. Instead, passage of the bond issues enables the city to borrow money with the confidence of the voters to pay for capital improvement projects like each of those that are outlined associated with each of the 5 bond issues. So with that being said, so that's kind of one chunk of it. The next 3 issues are charter amendments. So I'll touch on those. And so the red flyer over there refers to the charter amendments. The blue one has to do with the bond issues, if anyone's interested in those. So the charter amendments are issues 19 through 21. As I'm sure everyone on the commission knows, and most audience members are also familiar, the charter is the city's constitution, so it's a vibe. Issue 19 would improve the process for placing an initiative on the ballot, and it would require that any special interest group seeking to place an issue on the ballot first disclose who would benefit financially from the issue being placed on it, and years after the passage of the issue. So it's kind of like a transparency initiative with that. It would also expand the amount of time allotted for signature gathering from 1 year, as it currently is, to 2 years. And the Board of Election determines that they have an insufficient number of signatures to be placed on the ballot. So it gives you an extra 10 days to basically get some extra, the efficiency with which the Columbus Civil Service Commission can evaluate the to alignment with state law, clarify job class service acting mayor. And issue 21 would modernize the city's public offices by allowing the city to hold public meetings virtually and limited. So I know all that's kind of a lot. Does anybody have any? Stick around at the end of the meeting too, if one.
Sure, one.
On the issue with will we wheelchair accessible?
That is a good question, and I will get back to you on that.
I'm sure one.
On issue 20, who is going to be deciding how these low scores are going to become police officers and firefighters? Are going to become police officers and firefighters?
So I think you're referring to the potentially like 1 band, 2 bands, 3 bands. So any sort of subsequent testing associated with the position, not to mention background check, becoming a firefighter or a police officer.
The bands, if you're using the term bands.
Yeah, so the way that it operates now is that somebody who, you have an applicant pool for any given city job, and that has to be divided into 3 bands. And that's basically like people who score 90 to 100% would be 1 band, people who score 80 to 90, and then 70 to 80 would be the other 2. And then currently, the Civil Service Commission has to accept the 3rd. That, while it sounds great in theory, ends up limiting the city's ability to hire folks that would have been qualified, say in bands 2 and 3, because they drop out of the process before they can get through the 1st band. So this would allow the city to instead have, say, 2 bands or just 1 band, and then exercise a little bit of discretion and move faster through the process of determining who is qualified to move forward in the process, if that makes sense.
So, let's say I'm applying to become a police officer and my test score is 90, and somebody from the city, either a Civil Service Commission or a deputy chief or somebody can pick somebody who scored a 70% over me, correct?
They would, and yeah.
They would be permitted to do that, right? Okay. But do you know who would make that decision? Would that be let's just stay with the police department. Would that be a deputy chief, a commander? Would that be somebody from civil service? Do you know who that would be?
That I'm not sure of, but I can get back to the full commission on that and share that for sure.
Thanks.
So I was in the 90 band, and just like Joe was saying, you could, if they're going to 1 to 2 bands, I mean, it could be anybody. You know, you could have score as low as a 60 and be considered for this job.
If you could score a 60, is that still passing? Because I don't know what.
They would have to determine what a passing grade was. So.
But so if it's a pass-fail test, whatever.
Pennsylvania State Police one time went all the way down to 56. So.
And, and the important thing to keep in mind too is that, this is, each of these civil service tests are meant to test for minimum qualifications. So, just because somebody passes that test doesn't mean that they get the job. They would still have to go through interview process, certainly in the case of police and fire, training and subsequent testing that's associated with that. So they'd have to successfully go through that whole process plus the background checks in order to get the job.
But people would have been disqualified that would have passed the background check.
People
who scored in a 90 or something, and they pick a 68, and then that 68 can't pass a background check, well then that 90 got disqualified too.
But what I'm not sure about is how often it becomes a zero-sum competition in that way. That's what I'm not sure about is how many circumstances there would be where it would be one applicant over the other that's able to move forward under the new. But I'd be happy to look into it and then share that with the full commission.
That'd be great. Appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Next on the agenda, we have an update for the zoning code from Alex Sarsmith.
Right, so I'm here once again.
Yeah, that's like 3 consecutive meetings.
It is 3 consecutive meetings, and I don't think these are my first 3 meetings in Clintonville, so I'm a regular here now. Probably don't need to introduce myself, but I will, just for pure formality. So Alex Sauersmith, I'm a planner with the Department of Development Plan Division, and the gentleman that you see here handing out the materials is Nolan Harshaw, fellow planner of mine. He's going to be taking notes. If there are questions that he can't answer that I don't have the answers for on here, I'm not going to answer them this evening, but he's going to take them down and pull us to getting back to you all on this. So I'm going to run through this here a little bit. So, you know, the zoning code update, you know, we have an opportunity to create a shared vision of a new zoning code, which, you know, on its own doesn't really have the power to address the inequities that it helped create in the past. However, it's one of the tools that we can use to or utilize to address the current inequities that we see when we look across the breadth of our city and hopefully build a more prosperous Columbus for all residents. So I'm going to run through here, start out with some background information. Some of this you may already know, basic about zoning code, go through what we've learned in the past year or so that we've been doing this, and then look forward to the future here. So what is the zoning code? Zoning code are a set of rules that regulate what can and can't be done on a particular piece of property. They influence how we live, work, and how we get around. Zoning can help create the conditions for smart, sustainable, equitable growth to unlock economic potential of neighborhoods. It can provide residents a clear idea of what can be built in their neighborhoods and help developers avoid unnecessary time and cost when they invest in those neighborhoods. However, the zoning code cannot mandate development, and it will take time for investment in new construction to happen. The zoning code update also does not immediately change current uses as well, so keep that in mind. It will automatically change how it is used, if it is changed. So the Columbus zoning code has not been comprehensively updated since the 1950s, quite a long time ago. A lot of things have changed since then. But in 2020 to 2021, Columbus conducted a comprehensive assessment of the current code as the first step. Some of those key findings were the standards were not tailored to local conditions by and large. The code doesn't prioritize future housing and transit needs equitably. The code is not user-friendly, as you all probably have some experience with. Over-reliance on the site-by-site negotiated zoning actions, or there is an over-reliance on the site-by-site negotiated zoning actions. And there's a multi-layered and kind of scattered decision-making process that creates uncertainty for folks with that. And we also conducted a survey as part of the assessment phase. We distributed a survey that asked people to identify what they wanted to see in an updated zoning code. We received a little more than 3,000 responses, which is good, but could be better. Top 10 priorities were identified. The top three that were identified across the entire survey were fostering, number one, fostering walkable neighborhoods. We're talking about natural resources and supporting improved transit. However, we found that those top priorities varied amongst groups. For example, renters put affordable housing as their number one, improved transit as their number two, and promoting equity as their number three. For those under 35 years old, we found that improved transit was number one, conservation of natural resources again number two, and accommodating a growing population was number three. Amongst African Americans, promoting equity was number one, improved transit was number two, and affordable housing number three. With low income, very similar, but just in a different order. Affordable housing number one, promoting equity number two, and improved transit number three. So we had a sample of people, but it was limited because we didn't really hear from a representative sample of folks as well. For example, 77% of the respondents, and this is pretty typical, were homeowners, while only 17 were renters. So less than half of Columbus's households are owner occupied, so obviously not very representative. The racial diversity did not reflect our current population. The lack of neighborhood representation was also not there. 50% of the respondents were concentrated in just 10 neighborhoods of the 20 that we have. So where we're going with this, we're starting to focus on the major corridors first. So areas like West Broad, East Main, High Street, Indian Morris Road, 161. These places serve as the main streets of the communities and are places where transit, housing, employment centers, and connected amenities can be focused. By starting here, we can help to build more housing, to help fight rising housing costs, and we can create jobs closer where people live. Things that we will be considering for these key corridors, a few of the things we'll be considering for these key corridors are mixed-use development opportunities. So when we think about mixed use, we think about it in a multitude of ways related to two main ways. We think about mixed use as being inside one building or on one parcel, and that is one of the ways mixed use can occur. However, mixed use can also occur along a corridor or in a certain zoning district. You can have a mixed use in there. Either way, mixed use. Also looking at housing policies, parking policies, land use policies, development and building standards. But it's important to know that no decisions have been made on how the code will change to date. But the goal is to be responsive to the current and future community needs by making sure the code changes to leverage best practices that they are data-driven and be prepared for the projected growth population that we all know is coming to Columbus and have been coming to Columbus. In addition to the updates we're currently providing to area commissions and some civic commissions, we're also in the process of forming an advisory committee which will represent diverse perspectives and help guide the update process. The next big step in the zoning code process is to discuss, draft, and refine the code for mixed-use districts and transit corridors, as was aforementioned. And we're just getting started with that now. And throughout the entirety of 2023, we will hope to have a final draft of the code at the end of 2023 for mixed-use districts and transit corridors to be reviewed and adopted in spring of 2024. That's the goal. And there will be many opportunities for community engagement throughout this process. Now, in the summer of 2024, that's where we're going to shift our focus to phase 3 and go beyond those transit corridors, and we move into the other business centers and also into the neighborhoods as well. We expect very robust engagement there. The next steps, and some have notes here, throughout this process, we'll be asking the community for input in various components and strategies to help shape the zoning code tool for the community. We'll be hosting many opportunities for learning, discussing, and feedback at community's event online. In the neighborhoods, one of the first events that we'll be hosting is an educational exhibit called Undesigned the Red Line. If you haven't heard of it, it's being hosted by the YMCA. You can see that on their website, on the link on their website. So Undesigned the Red Line is an interactive exhibit that will spark discussion about how discriminatory urban development policies continue to impact Columbus neighborhoods to this day. We will be bringing this exhibit to 5 community locations between December and January. And please check out our website, because we want to drive you to our website. You can also go to YMCA's website and see that to get those event locations and details. And please encourage your friends and neighbors, as you see on this flyer. We have branded it to zone in on this effort and share their perspectives. The more people we hear from, the better. And we really want to have a better survey, a more representative survey next time we go through that. So you can stay updated with those information that you'll find at those links on the flyers that we pass out. That's what I have for you this evening. Now, I'm leaving it open for questions.
Start with a question, Rick. What, in terms of the timetable, will things happen in bits and pieces? You know, it strikes me it's already taken a long time in terms of the assessment and the evaluation. And is it really necessary to get to the end of the process before you affect any change, or do you begin to affect change incrementally along the way? Like if you begin with corridors, do you develop pieces for those corridors, whether those are planning overlays or form-based overlays or something like that, a tool that affects those, and you incrementally change the zoning code as you work through those issues, as opposed to waiting until 2025 or 2026 until you say, well, it's all done with it. It strikes me that the city's done itself a disservice by building this up as, you know, a monumental, it's like a constitutional convention that we're gonna rewrite the very fabric of the city's development code here, and it only happens every 70 years. Well, it only happens every 70 years because you've only let it happen every 70 years. You know, the rest of the city's code gets updated pretty frequently, and occasionally there's some unanticipated consequence, and they change something, and maybe they have to tweak it or remove it to change it back. But they try to keep pace with progress and the way things change. It seems to me like it's possible that you could be raising expectations dramatically, and then when you get to the end of the process, you know, another 3 or 4 years from now, the remedy seems like it doesn't live up to the billing, and I'm concerned that the city makes adequate progress along the way and doesn't keep continuing to sort of say, well, wait, the big change is coming. Just wait, the big change is coming. You know, I think we've been hearing about the big change is coming for a while, and I think those of us who've been following code, the progress of the code, know that there's certain things that are very wrong with the code that could be changed, and maybe should be changed before you reach the end of the process, because it's just an unjust thing.
Yeah, you know, while we've been spending time kind of setting the table, it's still really early in that process to really speculate upon, will we take a piecemeal approach, will we, you know, wait, try to figure everything out and do everything at once. I think that is still yet to be determined. However, addressing the major corridors starting around now and coming to a decision by that within about a year from now is, for the city, fairly fast paced. And for as impactful of a thing that it could be, I think that that's still moving at a decent clip. But again, taking those approaches. Any other questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. So I would love to learn a little bit more about the advisory council neighborhood perspective, but I also, with a different hat, work for an affordable housing developer that's mission driven, and I hope those voices will be in the room as well. But you know, perhaps one council could not address all of their specific needs, but maybe there will be smaller councils. I don't know if you could tell us more about what the structure of those looks like, the recruitment process, and how we can best join in and lend our voices.
Yeah, you know, as far as will there be smaller councils, I have not heard anything besides this main stakeholder group. That's not saying that there might not be subgroups that spur off of that. I believe the announcement will come here relatively in the near future about who those folks are from the names on the list. You have a pretty diverse representative group there as far as those things go. And the corridors mentioned that I mentioned here, that are mentioned on there, aren't the only corridors that are going to be looked at as well. So if there's going to be more than that, again, it is yet to be determined exactly what those are and settle and all that. However, I think there's going to be enough opportunities for engagement on a lot of different levels that there's going to be plenty of opportunities for folks like folks in the affordable housing realm to have voice in this.
Will there be a limit on the number of developers on these councils?
Right. Fair question. Fair question. Most of the names that
For profit.
Right.
Yeah.
For profit. Yeah, sure. Most of the
We all knew what I was talking about.
Right. The vast majority of the names I've seen on the list are not, and they're more so community folks like yourselves or like people that might be in this audience. Not to say that they won't.
No, I
Obviously,
understand there need to be some, but I don't want 4 developers in one
to
city.
dominate the conversation, right? And we end up with something more like maybe instead of something that's different.
Alex, I thought I read where some of these changes are going to be made incrementally before the big changes are all made. Is it?
It depends on how you look at that. I mean, the corridors is a way of, we're dealing with that first before going into the neighborhoods and looking at residential areas or other business centers as well. So in that way, there's some things we have toward. But as far as anything more smaller than that, I'm not aware. Nobody has told me this, you know, we're going to look at this and look at this and look at this. I'm not saying that that's not going to happen. But nothing has been set in stone as far as what those things would be and how they will be addressed in that exact time.
Any other questions from the commission? Questions from the public?
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, please, go ahead.
Well, one of you do.
Sorry to interrupt you. Kari Engen, Meadowlark Lane. Did you say there's supposed to be a survey active right now?
There's not a survey active right now. There was an idea to put another survey out there. However, they'd be rehashing the survey that had already been done. We decided we'd like to do something a little bit different than that. And so, you know, we're going to do some back and forth. We have communication consultants on board that will come up with that survey. We'll work with to come up with that survey. And I would expect to see something coming out in the near term, but no, not right at the moment. We wanted to make sure there was something a little bit different to engage on, and not to say that the old survey wasn't substantial, but substantial in different ways than we already went over, so that we're doing a variety, not just survey to survey.
Great. Other questions? Alex, thanks very much.
I have no questions for you, Alex.
Okay. Well, thanks very much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Before we get to public comment, Devon, do you want to just introduce yourself?
Oh, yeah. Well, my name is Adam Marshall. I'm the new community outreach coordinator for the Frederick County Auditor, Mike Cinziano. And we're just here to see you all. I've been going for the last couple of weeks. I've been around for about almost 2 months. And really we just had a affordable housing fair, had almost 600 plus people. I have a couple of the guys that we had to give out for the organizations that came and supported that community. We were at East High School. Yeah, so if you have any questions, I'll be here after. And if you have any questions for the auditor or for the office, I can try to help you out or which is the right person. Great.
And if you're here after, it has to be outside the door.
Yes. And that was much more polite than what we get from
Yes,
the
Yeah, some places are like, oh, you gotta go like right now.
We'll have a question. How long have you been with the Auditor Cinziano now?
2 months.
2 months.
So as long as this guy over here, Marshall.
Yeah, in his office with community relations, he has, I think, probably set the bar for community engagement. So
I'm here,
you've got
I'm
a
here.
tough
So
road to
it's
go.
good
Good luck to you on that, but we're glad to have you here. Commissioner McClain.
Will you please follow up with an email to make sure you're broken in right? Would you mind sending out an email to the commission stating what would behoove a citizen or a resident to participate in the neighborhood survey that comes up, the little icon that comes up when you look up a property?
Absolutely.
So talk a little bit about that. And then the upcoming sesquicentennial that's coming up next year.
Mhm.
So if you wouldn't mind just giving us 2 of your snippets on that and an email to the commission so that we can disseminate that information throughout our districts, that'd be awesome.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. We have a few minutes for public comment, just a few. Are there any questions or comments from the public before we adjourn? Great. We actually will be kicked out tonight in a rude fashion. So thanks very much for your attendance. We'll see you. Next meeting is November 3rd at 7 o'clock in this room. So
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, stand up.
We're adjourned.
The life is stopped.